Welcome everyone to another edition of Late Night on Base. I'm your host, Buildable, actually outside my house. Brick background. Excited for this one. Truly am excited because we have one of the most premier key opinion leader in the game, and more than just a key opinion leader, a guy who's just super cool and has produced bangers after banger calls over the years, and someone I've followed prior to even doing a podcast. So I'm really happy to have him on. Penn, how you doing today, man?
Hey, pretty good. Appreciate the high praise, man. That's a nice opener right there for me, man.
Hey, bro. I mean, I only speak the truth. And honestly, I wanted to reach out to you because I've been in the crypto game for a while, and I want to dive deep into your thought process and how long you've been. But for me, especially in the last cycle, 2021, it was heavily influenced with the KOL game, and you were one of the premier guys that I followed at the time, amongst others. And you've not only have produced amazing calls, you've continued to grow. A lot of those people in that cycle kind of like went away and maybe they like left. But you've kept grinding, bro, and you're actually one of the most well respected KOLs that doesn't just call complete garbage. You can tell the ones that will just show anything because of a payment,
Yeah.
but you're more particular, and I do like that, and I think your followers like that. So yeah, man, I just had to give you the praise. But Penn, I know about you, but I think, my community is filled with DJs, but it's also filled with like maybe new base participants, retail, maybe they're more sophisticated DeFi people. If you don't mind, maybe they're listening to this on Spotify, maybe they're on YouTube, maybe they're on pods and they mentioned my Jesse clip and they're coming across this episode. If you don't mind, why don't you tell them who is Ben?
Yeah, so I've been full time in this space since 2020. It was really the COVID lockdowns that happened was really what kind of got my start full time, at least in crypto. I kind of tinkered around with it a little bit in like the 2017, 2018, put some stuff into Litecoin. Even though Bitcoin was the thing that was ripping, my mindset was I didn't want to get in the main runner. I wanted to get in like the side thing, which was just kind of cringy to think about it because Bitcoin just outperformed Litecoin like crazy. But so I tinkered around with it a little bit in 2017, rode it up to the top, and then 2018 happens, and 2018 was just a brutal drawdown for everybody in the space. I wasn't nearly as into crypto as I was in 2020, but so crypto's kind of always been on my radar more or less since like 2017, I would say. 2020, COVID was just the craziest thing, right? So I prior to doing crypto was in banking. And back then, this was still kind of like early with COVID. They didn't really know what to do if people had COVID in the workforce. So at the branch or the bank I was working at, because there wasn't really any clear kind of like government procedure at the time of what to do, what the bank would do is anytime they had somebody that had COVID, they would just, rather than send that person home, anybody that person had been in contact with in that branch, they sent the
Whoa.
entire branch home. So you had these different teams like rotating through each bank. So even though I had been at one branch, one specific branch for 3 years, I became part of this like rotation team that if one branch had to get sent home, we ended up going to their branch. I worked at like a bunch of different branches then, and then somebody on my rotation team had they weren't even sick. They weren't sick, but they had been around somebody that had COVID. So it worked its way up to HR. HR sent my entire branch home. So for
Yeah.
that 2 week, it was, and we were off for 2 weeks. So it wasn't even like a short, like couple days. They sent that entire branch home for 2 weeks. During that 2 week period is when I got into crypto full time. This was before I had Penn, before I had a Twitter account or anything like that. My first foray into crypto was actually as a builder. Started out as I just aped into this random little shitcoin called Hex Burn. It was off
Hmm.
some like meme thing off Richard Hart, but basically it was you buy tokens and it would burn a portion of the buy basically. So there was just constantly supply getting burnt. And it was really unique at the time. People thought it was really cool. Turns out the guy ended up rugging the project anyways. That was literally the first thing I ever aped through
Hmm.
like a wallet, through like Onchain more or less. I ended up becoming a community member of that one. The guy actually made me a mod before he ended up rugging it. So I barely knew much about crypto. I ended up being a mod of this project. We kept it alive. I he didn't rug it in the traditional sense of pulling liquidity, right? He sold his team supply and left. I guess
Mm,
nowadays, you could just that's how most CTOs start typically, right?
yeah.
Um, a totally different game back in 2020. So they made me and this one other guy a mod. We basically held the project up and more or less for like another week or so. This was all during this time period where I'm off work. I'm at home. I don't have any work, so I'm able to just kind of sit there and literally mod the chat the entire time. Another project that was building saw kind of the work I was doing as a moderator and like keeping people calm, and he thought I was pretty good with talking to other community members. He asked if I wanted to be a mod for a project he was building. Um, Turns out I ended up being a mod for that project too, but I started doing more for it. Started asking me for help with writing text for the website. He asked if I knew any good people that would be good for mods. I started bringing on more mods, and then kind of halfway through that process of like a couple days of him onboarding me, he was like, "Look, you're doing way more than I would have expected from a mod. Do you just want to be like the co-founder of this project with me?" I was like, "Okay, yeah, that's dope. Like, let's do it." Um, that project, it was called Lid Protocol, and it ended up being a liquidity burning launchpad. But that was what made me end up quitting my job at the end of the 2 week period while I was off.
Wow.
We're basically launching this project, right? 2 days before I'm supposed to go back to work, this project that I'm now from a mod to now a co-founder of because I've helped write some of the website, I've helped onboard people. We end up doing a pre-sale and we raised about $850,000, um,
Wow.
which I couldn't believe it. It was past either of our goals. And at that point, I was supposed to net about 40K from the pre-sale. And that was enough for me to just take a complete gamble and be like, look, I think maybe I can make this crypto thing work out. So before at the end of that 2 week period, I called the HR at my bank and told them like, hey, look, I need to put in my 2 week notice. This isn't gonna work. I found something else. I tried to finish out the 2 weeks at the bank. I made
Mm,
it one day and they fired me because I was on my phone the entire time. Because this was a live project at this
of
point. This was
course.
my new focus, and so they sent me home. But yeah, for the most part, I originally started in this space as a builder, more or less. I was on that project for most of 2020. I didn't make a profile like Penn or the
Hmm.
Twitter account Penn until uh, late 2020. I had been on this project. It was going really well. The other thing is because it was a launch pad, we constantly had projects coming in and launching. We would get a percentage of their supply and we would get a percentage of their raise. And then if you were the one that had brought that project in, you also got a cut of it too. So I had continual payment coming from this. Um, so I was just doing well at this, and then I kind of I don't know if I would call it maybe like stir crazy, but I wanted to start looking into like other projects. When
Hmm.
you're on a project as a team member, you can't really talk about other projects. You can't really be like, hey, I aped into this. I think this could do well. I kind of wanted to do that type of stuff. Um, so just prior to me really starting to look at other projects, I made the Penn account just so people could have a face to the name of whoever is the COO of this project, Lid Protocol, because the project was up for a little over a year. So I had established a pretty decent reputation. Um, like I said, and you had just mentioned the Bull Run Gravano. Me and him actually go back to 2020. I've known him. He was one of the first people my project ever did an AMA with. Was his
Oh,
community,
well.
ironically. Um, so I had built up a good reputation with people like him that really trusted me. So they kind of trusted that, hey, this guy actually kind of like knows what he's doing. He's really not, just kind of going for whatever. He's looking at things, trying not to get like rugged, basically.
Yeah.
Um, so I made the Penn Twitter account mainly to just help promote the project. But then as I got further on into the project, I kind of wanted to branch out a little bit, and that's basically what more or less started the like influencer KOL side of this of the Penn account, I guess.
Dude, there's a lot to unpack there. It's just funny how like life takes unexpected turns, right? If you didn't get sent home for those 2 weeks, I don't know if we'd be talking right now. I don't know if your life would
Probably
be
not,
taking.
dude. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. And honestly, that was a blessing in disguise. And I think that's so cool, man. Like, this is the first time I'm really hearing the backstory of like who you've been and like being able to be like working your way on the ground floor basically as a mod and then
Yep.
to a co-founder world. That's like how that's like the dream, man. That's how a lot of the businesses do, starting from the intern, working your way up, and then as you progress and you show your worth, and it's not just like it's not. It's cool to know, and it's inspiring actually too to know that like you didn't just start from like, hey, I'm Penn, I have 50,000 followers. It's like you worked your way from the ground, showed your worth. People saw that worth. Then you started networking,
Yeah.
and then people started trusting you because they know who you are and the work you provide. And now you've come to the top. And I'm all about entrepreneurship. A lot of times when I bring on
Hmm.
people, actually most people I bring on, they're all builders or they're, KOLs like yourself. We've all built something, your brand, maybe it's a tech protocol, maybe it's your meme project you're leading. It doesn't really matter. But
Yeah.
that's the entrepreneurial spirit. So you embody that, man. So I just want to give a shout out and praise to you, bro. It's
I
legit.
appreciate it. Yeah, I was big into I was definitely the builder side is how I got intro to crypto, and I did a couple other projects after that. Lid was pretty good. It got to This was in 2020. It got to an all-time high of 14 million, if I remember correctly, which is
Nice.
pretty nice. The project I did after that in 2021 was called Brainiac. That one got to about 100 million, and then the
Wow.
one towards the end of 2021, the last thing I've officially done was called Midas DAO, which got to about 140 million market cap,
And
and
are
that was
all three of these are DeFi or
yeah, all three of these were DeFi. Brainiac was a type of farm,
mm,
similar to there was a prior project called Smart out there.
mm,
This was kind of just a little bit before AVAX season. If you remember
I do.
Time
Yeah,
and Ohm, this
I
was
do.
kind of in a similar vein to those. Brainiac was a little different, and then Midas DAO was more or less just a time fork, just with like crazy APR. That was really the last time I haven't
Mm,
done building stuff since. I guess I wouldn't even really consider myself much of a KOL because I don't really I don't do any paid promos.
yeah.
So I don't do really token allocations either. If I get into a project at most, if I can like OTC in, I'll do something like that or a private sale, but the private sale meta is super dead right now.
Yeah.
Nowadays, basically anything I'm talking about on my account is just stuff I've usually bought in on a dip or I've tried to buy in on size of something that I think is good. So I know like the KOL term is for me at least it's more like a bit of a mixed bag because I don't really call it's kind of like you were saying, I don't really call a lot in general,
Mm.
and that's because a lot of stuff doesn't really interest me too much. But usually if I'm getting in something, it's because like I actually bought into it and I actually see like a vision for it more or less.
Yeah, and I think as I was kind of referencing earlier, I think that's what kind of separates you apart from a lot. So for me, the way the term KOL is, it's not necessarily a connotation of like, oh, because the majority of KOLs, yeah, they're lumped in with the ones that will literally call dog shit, and if they pay them, I
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah.
But then that's I think what makes you more personable and more respected. People like you are very selective. You're not the ones who are going to take those allocations, and people believe that, have faith that if you're calling something, it means you believe in it. And to me, the key opinion leader is more along the lines of somebody who understands the market, whose words can influence for good or bad, but you have the respect of people and you've built your following into that term. So that's why, and you understand DJing culture with the right
Yeah.
motives, which I think is fascinating. So, all right, so your reputation precedes itself. You've been a builder, you've worked your way three different projects, established the Penn account. Um, Talk to us. What has been, and you've probably been in part of, as an investor in a lot of projects, what has been your biggest win, your most legendary call?
My most legendary call would probably be that's a tough question, man. Because I think I know what call has made me the most money, and that would be Brett. Brett's made the most money
Right.
by
Yeah.
far. Like Brett's been my personal biggest win has been Brett. And then I would probably say after Brett would be probably Toshi. Toshi's been a big one. A lot of the base stuff, I absolutely crushed it on base. But I think the call that really built my account and gave me the most rep was probably Floki. Floki back in
Yeah.
2021, they had the relaunch on BSC, and I was part of that relaunch. So I had in I don't remember what market cap it was, but I had 10K in, and that grew to a seven-figure bag. It wasn't
Wow.
as big as Toshi or Brett or even Chomp. All those bags have been larger than my Floki bag was. But you got to remember, Floki went from like 20, 30 mil to 3.5 billion. Like it was just
Yeah.
massive. And this is 2021 culture, and it was just I remember the biggest influx, I think biggest growth I had on my account was definitely Floki. And that was different for me because kind of like I was telling you, most of the stuff I was doing, this is 2021, I still kind of had that builder reputation. And most of the stuff I built was some type of utility type thing. So I wasn't super into the meme coin space. Like nowadays, I would say I'm more into the meme coins than anything else. I still have a couple utility things I'm in right now that I really like, but they don't pop. They don't do the
Yeah.
same stuff as like uh meme coins. But back then, that was like my first real foray into meme coins, and I just think that Floki call is what really kind of helped grow my account more than anything else. And I think that's what established a lot of uh respect amongst my peers, I would say, because that was like I was bull posting the entire way up, and it was just like the most insane thing. 3.5 billion was
That's
nuts.
crazy. I wish I had a time machine, man, to go back in 2021. I literally faded all these memes. I just didn't understand the culture. Right now, it's like it's completely a meme super cycle, and now
Yeah,
memes are on the forefront of everyone's minds. Back then, I was sort of like, I'll admit it. I was like an ETH maximalist. I was like, utility is the only thing that matters. DeFi summer is stupid. Collect more ETH. Meme coins, like who's gonna invest in it? Like I faded SHIB. I faded Doge. I mean, I can't
yeah,
take back, but like a lot of people, probably did that. And so Floki, I remember Floki, and I just didn't even think about it. Jokes on me because I literally faded generational wealth. But it is good to know that, especially now, and I think that's another reason why, especially new participants, and I do want to get into the base ecosystem because obviously it's a base podcast. I don't just do base stuff, but like you were literally the first person that I even heard talked about base in 2023, but we'll get to that. So with
yeah,
Floki, that's amazing that you got in so early and people followed you from it. So it makes sense. That was basically, for those that weren't around, it was Doge, then it was Shiv, and then it was Floki. Basically, those are the three.
yeah.
So tell me, when you do, so for instance, let's look at Floki. When you do look at a project, you know, what are the traits that you like, and maybe in Floki's case or just in general, like what are the traits you think every successful project in the degen space must have to be a big winner? What was it about Floki? What was it about, anything that you think causes this to do well?
Yeah, and just to touch back on something real quick, you said you faded generational wealth. Dude, it's okay. My Telegram group back then, Planet of the Ape, it's kind of where like I'm sure you know these guys like Pow and Maytaus kind of
Yeah.
came from that group. They were members
Oh,
of the
wow.
group. That was my old Telegram group, and we actually had a couple people come in shilling SafeMoon, and I banned each of them. So it's like,
Oh,
we
man.
Safe Moon got to like 9 billion or something. So like,
That's
don't worry, dude.
insane.
I've faded more than that. Um,
Oh, man.
for back to the question, what do I think makes a strong case for the project? For me, when I'm looking at something, the most important thing to me is always going to be the narrative and how simply it can be explained to people. For something like Floki, it's just a super simple narrative. The narrative is it's Elon Musk's dog. So
Yeah.
if it's Elon Musk's dog, Elon's a dog person, he's going to post about Floki more. It was really kind of built around that narrative. When it's something that's super easily digestible, something really easy to grasp onto, makes it super easy to share it to the average person. The thing that makes things like utility projects hard and why you don't ever really see them go mainstream is because it's very difficult to explain to the average person. So if I take, for instance, this project I'm in called Kerosene, it's a really complex algorithmic like stablecoin, basically. Um, how am I going to explain that to the average person?
Yeah.
It's very difficult for me to explain. You got to do X, you got to do Y, and then you got to do Z. Now, Kerosene's doing really well because it has a specific base of people that will ape into it. But when I'm really looking at something that I want to talk about a lot, that I want to post about a lot, it needs to be something that is just super simple, straight to the point narrative, couple words, easily digestible. Next thing would be obviously the community has to be thriving. Needs to be a really well managed community, and I think that comes with how professional a team is. One of the quickest red flags I look for in a project is how their socials are being handled by the team. If
Yeah.
they're posting charts, if they're posting price, automatic red flag. I don't want to touch it. Sometimes that's backfired on me. Myro, for instance, on Solana, which really kicked off a huge Solana resurgence, went to like 400 mil or something. I didn't get into Myro specifically because I saw their team talking about price. I would say 9 out of 10 times, you're usually right if you fade that. If you see a team talking about price, that's usually something I don't want to touch.
Is it
Sometimes
because
it
it's more like amateur hour or
well, it's something I learned from very early on in 2020, and that is namely, if you're in the US at least, if you're a owner of a project and you're consistently talking about price in the chart, it's usually an SEC
yeah.
issue you don't want to mess with. So I've always kind of had that hard ingrained in my head. But I don't like looking at a project and the team is talking about price. The team, in my opinion, should not be worried about the price of a project or how the chart looks. Obviously, behind closed doors, we're all human. We all want our project to do well, right? But that's not something I think is becoming of a professional team if they're talking about price or the chart. They're retweeting other callers. It's like, I just want a project to focus on what the project is doing. That would be so if it's narrative, being easily digestible, team professionally running socials, and community, those would be kind of the big three things that I kind of look for.
I think that's great advice, and I think you're kind of right on that sense. Like you can tell, especially for me, how I look at it, it's like, I want to make sure the vibes in the community are really good. And you're right, like the team shouldn't worry about the price. Like that will come. Those that are just shilling price shows that they don't really have anything else to really generate hype. And it also shows like, if you're a legit team, you shouldn't be worrying about that. That will come. What's more important is the vibes in the community, how the telegrams run, how the Twitters run. Obviously, crypto culture lives on X first and foremost. And so, if I see a project, this is just me personally, that hasn't tweeted in a couple of days, I'm just like, this is
Yep.
stupid. Like
Yeah.
you're literally not worth a penny of mine. Super simple to see. So, all right, 2023, end of 2023. I remember specifically, I think base launched in August. You literally, bro, were the first person of
Yeah.
influence that
Yeah.
tweeted about base. And at that time in 2023, there was a lot of different chains popping. There's Doge chain. For those that don't know, it was like a 4-week run where people were just aping into Doge. And then base came out, and I, along with probably a lot of people, had the mentality of like, oh, this is stupid. Who's going to use base chain? But not you. You got into, I think you said Toshi, and you
Yeah.
just said you were into Brett. So talk to me. And a lot of people will really like to know this because a lot of my followers are all base chats and
Yeah.
Stacy's. What was it about base that made you be like, aha, this is going to pop?
I think initially, especially it was the link to Coinbase was probably the most obvious thing. I think why people kind of initially went over to Base Chain was that. Um, but yeah, Base launched in I want to say it was sometime around like July. I can't exactly remember. But they launched back in like really early. And initially the initial days to Base, it was kind of crazy. They didn't have what's it called? They didn't have a bridge. There was no bridge. You sent initially, Base had a soft launch, and then they had their official live kickoff party where Brian and Jesse had a little live spaces, or it wasn't a live space. It was through like some Coinbase thing. You could click on the link and watch them talk about the official launch of Base. That's when it kind of became live to everybody, but it was actually live 2 weeks prior to that. They just didn't have a bridge off chain. So essentially, you sent to this contract. The contract would send money onto your side. They had a RPC and everything, so you could just pop it into whatever wallet you were using. But for the first 2 weeks, it was almost like the money you had on there didn't really exist because there
Yeah.
was no way to bridge any of the ETH off at the time. None of the dexes that are there now, so there was no sushi swap, there wasn't a Uniswap. There was the most used was there was one called Rocket Dex, if I remember correctly, and then Leet Swap were the two big ones at the time. So initially, the initial movement to it, I think, was people are like, hey, this is actually Coinbase's blockchain. This could pump. And then I'm sure you remember the Bald token that launched just went
Yeah.
absolutely insane. And there were just rumors flying everywhere. Is this Brian Armstrong's token? What is this? I saw some people saying it was Justin Sun. It was just this crazy token with unbelievable liquidity and just this guy with tens of millions of dollars just pumping money into it. That really started to attract quite a lot of people. But for me, especially, the biggest thing was I think over time, I thought it would really pay off that it's linked to Coinbase. So that initial run we had, I looked into a couple different things, but obviously the one that stayed around was Toshi, and that was really kind of the only thing that was on base, I would say, until probably about February of
Yeah.
2024 this year. But yeah, it was initially just Toshi. I got in really early to Toshi, rode that all the way up to 30 mil all time high at the time, and then base kind of cooled off at the end of 2023, and a lot of people started chirping. There was a lot of FUD around Toshi. I mean, Toshi at the end of the day, a lot of people don't remember this, but Toshi is on like its fourth version right now. The first
Yeah.
version of Toshi was on Leet Swap, which got exploited, and they had to pause the entire DEX of Leet Swap because liquidity was being drained from projects. So Toshi relaunched on Sushi Swap, um, and it was a big blow to the community, but the relaunch went really well. What a lot of people don't remember is that Toshi is a CTO at the end of the day. The team that I was on Toshi right now, so Coco, was not the team that initially started on Toshi. The initial dev of it took the entire marketing wallet, which was about 100 ETH at the time, something like that. He sold his team share and just dipped. Just we had to pay for the socials of the project to be able to get the Twitter and to get the Telegram back. So a lot
Wow.
of people don't really remember this, and it was a huge FUD thing. I'll never forget. I'm helping the takeover team. There's about 5 or 6 guys that were willing to put up and pay for things for Toshi. Um, just to get back the socials and everything. And then it started to come out that, hey, the original dev sold. This was before the CTO meta was even a thing. So Toshi got footed relentlessly. And at the time, Toshi was really the only project on base that was doing anything at this point. It was at around 30 million. The FUD starts coming out. People start flipping out. And, me and Coco are trying to say, look, this guy that sold his tokens, he has no control anymore. This is the V2 contract. He has no keys. He has no access to anything. They relaunched the contract completely. He was completely out. Didn't really matter though. I mean, it just got fudded like crazy. But I kept posting about Toshi the entire time. Even when it got down to 1.6 mil, I was still in the community. I still believed that my narrative, I was pretty sure was right. It's Brian Armstrong's cat. If base chain runs at some points, which I really think back, I'm talking about back then. I really thought it was going to run. I really was convinced that I had this right and that most of the other people were wrong. It's not just some fad. It's base chain. It's linked to Coinbase. Um, and Toshi just sat there for in that $1 to $2 million range. And I was still here. And I think that's a lot of the reason my account had a lot of growth recently was a lot of people saw that I rode Toshi from 30 million all the way down to 1.6 million. I didn't falter. I didn't sell any tokens. I kept talking about it. I bought more. And then, we had this massive base run, and I've just been a pretty firm believer in base really since like day one, more or less.
Yeah, and I think, well, I didn't know the story about Toshi, but I think that's amazing. Like people see, and that's another reason, I'm not just trying to kiss your ass because you're on the pod. It's legit. Like people see you still bull posting at 30 million, but yet you're still bull posting at 1 million, which shows consistency. It shows dedication. It shows loyalty to the project that you do decide to enter. People respect that, and now Toshi's arguably top five, top four, top five, top three meme on base. And I think as the bull run matures, like I got into base late April, I think. I didn't start this podcast till June, but April I kind of faded the February run. But just seeing, one of the benefits of base in a newer chain is less dilution, right? So there's
Yeah.
less memes versus like ETH and Solana. Like, bro, there's tons of memes every day. But for you to kind of get into a project when there's no really competition, I come from the pulse sharing world as well. And at that time, 2023, like, Pulse Chain, not Hex, but like they launched their own thing, and like some of the top projects were like the only projects. So it helps capture market share. So base was the same way, and it still is the same way because right now, there's only, I don't even know how many memes besides Brett are above 100 million. I don't think too many, maybe one or two, maybe zero. I don't know.
Yeah.
But there's a lot between like the 10 and 50 range. So I think,
Yeah.
people are gonna, post on or, capture the attention. So yes, I think it's a great distinction with you that no matter if the price is high, the price is low, you're still supporting. Probably
Mhm.
takes you back to those builder days of when you were,
Oh yeah.
the mod.
I mean, I became, I became a lot more adept at what I was doing in crypto. As I've been here full time for 4 years now. It's going to be going on 5 pretty soon. The more and more you're here, the more and more you pick up. A couple of my most of my really close circle are guys that are like exceptionally good at doing things like sniping and botting. Being around guys like that, Tom J, um, has really helped develop my ability to chain sleuth as well. Kind of
Yeah.
dig in deep, kind of see what's going on. I'm really good at going through things like base scan and ether scan, kind of going schizo and trying to figure out wallet links and stuff like that. So a lot of the stuff I've been talking about, especially recently, is finding different links to things. I know I pushed, posted a couple times about the Toshi sending like a ton of money to Binance and was like, yo, hold up, what the hell is this type thing? Looks like it was a Binance listing or something like that. So kind of being around those guys has really helped shore up kind of my skill set. And that on top of believing in an overall narrative really helps when it comes to holding things long term, because if it's one thing if it's just a belief, when you're able to believe, okay, this is what I think the narrative is going to do. It's another thing when you can also go into the project, go into the holders, go look at like what's going on. You can actually see what's happening and understand what it is. Also really helps in terms of holding. If especially if EDOs, for example, one of the things you talked about like really early on, EDO's supply control was like really bad initially. There was a couple holders in like the 3-4% range. This was before it broke out. Nowadays, or now, when you actually like look at the kind of the top holders and kind of the whales, it's thinned out a lot more, and it's much easier to hold something long term when okay, there's not as many people that have 3-4% supply. That's a ton. It's much more evenly spread throughout. You can kind of see the wallet distribution. So when you kind of pair up what you can actually see and verify with your own eyes to a belief that you have, it makes like a million times easier.
Amazing. Penn, any last words that you have? I mean, honestly, bro, I could probably talk to you for hours, but I know attention spans of Degens in particular is
Yeah.
pretty limited. Any last words, man, you have for your followers that are loyal to you?
I think I'm always I don't know if I would say I'm a profit maxi at the end of the day. I don't think I have any particular token that I'm a maxi of. If there was a token, it would be Brett, I guess. Brett, like I said, told you, Brett's been the biggest win of my career, I would say. I love Brett, love the team. But I'm a profit maxi at the end of the day, but I haven't had the growth or the following. I wouldn't have the same growth or the following if it wasn't for base chain. I really enjoy base chain. I like base chain. My thesis is still that I think ETH is very undervalued right now. It performs quite poorly compared to Bitcoin. And when you look at where Bitcoin is in relation to ATH and where ETH is in relation to ATH, night and day contrast. ETH is very lagging behind. I do think as we go further and further into the year, depending on what happens with the election cycle, that's a big thing, obviously. Like whoever wins, drastic impact on the stock market in general, and then crypto as a whole. Um, Depending on who wins, I think I don't really like to get political or anything, but I think if as long as Kamala doesn't win, I think we generally are going to have some sort of breakout from crypto. My general thesis is still that ETH is undervalued. I think if ETH moves up, we're going to see a resurgence in something like Base Chain. I really love Base. I want Base to do well because it has done well for me so far. I think it's a bit in the mud right now. I think there has been some mishandling from the foundation in terms of showing love to the projects that have been here and really promoting Base to the masses that I would really like to see remedied at some point. A lot of these guys have been wanting to push the culture here, really grow it, but it's very much felt like I talked to a lot of these guys. I talked to teams that I'm not even a part of. I talked to a lot of more or less every top project on Base. I've spoken to somebody on their team kind of about how Base is doing. A lot of them know me because I've been around. Like I said, I've been here since day one. It would be really nice to see kind of the foundation remedy some of that and get behind some of the projects that are building here. Because, meme coins don't need to build a utility for them to still be building something. At the end of the day, building culture is going to be the thing that attracts the most people to a place. And Solana has done that impeccably well. I think ETH generally was doing that well, but they faltered a little bit here. But even in general, with all that said, I still think ETH is undervalued. And I think when ETH corrects to the positive, moves back up, we should see some sort of resurgence on Base. I just don't see a future where if ETH does well, Base doesn't do well. I just think it's cheap transaction fees, super easy for people to settle payments on this chain. I'm still bullish on it long term. It's just we're a bit in the muds right now. But I definitely wouldn't, if you have bags on Base, I wouldn't just count it out right now, basically.
I love it. Penn, I appreciate you, man. Thanks for coming on.
I appreciate it, man. It was fun. Thank you, man.
Of course. And everyone, if you're watching this or listening to this on Spotify, head over to YouTube. On YouTube, we'll make sure to have Penn's description, his X account on the links. And also, we will have Late Night on Base's account. So if you haven't done so, please follow and subscribe. It literally costs nothing, helps us produce more banger content. Until next time, everyone.